Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Nick Bray from NBA. We're an architecture studio with offices in both Vancouver and Victoria, working across British Columbia, including here on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Before we jump into today's topic, I'd like to briefly touch on an issue that will significantly impact architecture firms and the broader consulting industry across BC. This month, legislation is expected to move towards third reading that will require architectural and consulting services to charge provincial sales tax on invoices. Now, this is coming, of course, at a time when our industry is already facing considerable challenges. Many firms are concerned about the added burden this could place on projects and clients. So MBA is part of an organization called ARC Forum, which is a growing collective of mid-sized architecture firms across BC that brings together senior leaders from those firms to share knowledge, strengthen collaboration, and advocate on issues affecting architectural practice in our province. Please feel free to email me if you want to learn more. But ARC Forum has prepared a letter opposing the proposed PST changes, and we're going to send that letter out tomorrow. So if you're an authorized leader in a architecture firm here in BC, we'd greatly appreciate your support today. We'll place a link to that letter in the Q&A box, and it only takes a moment to sign it. So looking ahead, we have one final seminar prepared before we go into the summer break. It's another topic that our office is particularly interested in learning more about. It's about cyber security. So seminar 13 is on June 23rd, and it's about protecting your firm and your work, presented by Ted Baines from Links Edge Solutions. So a few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. We'll post the AIBC accreditation link in the Q&A box during the presentation. Please make sure you complete the form if you want to receive those CPD credits. Just have your membership number handy. A quick reminder for architects, intern architects, that the AIBC's reporting deadline is coming up at the end of June, so end of next month. So yeah, try and get your points all recorded before then. Please also use the Q&A box throughout the presentation for questions and comments. We'll try and address as many of these as we can in a discussion afterwards. And we'll also circulate our presenters' contact information following the seminar. And recordings of both this seminar and all the previous sessions can be found on NBA's YouTube channel. So on to today's session, which is titled Blueprint for Visibility, how to get your architecture published. So today's conversation is really about thinking more intentionally about how we communicate our work, how publication, storytelling, and visual representation can become part of the design process itself, rather than something considered only at the end of a project. I've been privileged to know Martin Knowles for many, many years now, and have always admired both the quality of his work and the thoughtfulness behind it. Martin is a Vancouver-based architectural photographer whose work is recognized for its careful attention to atmosphere, materiality, light, and spatial experience. His collaborative and highly considered approach has made him a trusted creative partner for many architects and designers looking to elevate how their projects are communicated, whether through award submissions, publications, or broader public engagement. His photography has contributed to hundreds of award-winning projects, including work recognized through programs such as the AFBC, REIC, SARB, and Georgie Awards, and has been featured in publications including Architizer, Canadian Architect, and Western Living, as well as numerous books. So thank you for joining us, Martin, and over to you.
Thank you, Nick. Can everybody hear me? That's a yes. Okay, good stuff. So, what does it mean to get something published? For a lot of us, we immediately think of having our work someplace in a book or magazine that we can point to when we walk into a place like Inform or Vancouver Special or our local newsstand. And it's also increasingly about having things online, whether that's in one of the many online media outlets that are available to the architecture and design community, or even on our own website and social media, and also on awards programs, like the AFBC Awards, the Architizer Awards, all of that sort of thing. In short, what we are talking about is sharing your project stories in various ways with people who care. A good story should make someone else care about your project. Now, that person might be an editor of a magazine. It might be your potential new client who might ask you to design something similar or not so similar with some ideas that you've shared. It might be your architect colleagues who see it and ask you how you solved a particularly thorny design problem in the clever way that you did. Or it might be somebody who sees a photo of your building and immediately wants to go visit it, or at least find out more. Now, not all of the stories you might tell about your project are relevant to everyone. And one of the biggest keys to success in publishing a project is to find a good fit between the project, the media outlet, and the people that they serve. Now, there's a bunch of reasons to get things published, and they're all valid and good and valuable. There's the joy of sharing interesting work that you're proud of. There is having influence in the architectural community and being part of the wider conversation. Having things published can also be a great way of building a practice and building a legacy. There are plenty of buildings, after all, that a lot of us have experienced and will probably only experience only in photos, but it feels like we've actually been there and walked around, even though we never have. And finally, there's the marketing reason of helping you get your next client, whether that is work that you want to do that's similar to what you just did or completely different. All these are great. And depending on what your priorities are, you are going to be prioritizing a few of these over others, and that varies. Now, getting a project published is itself a project. Who knew, right? With certain types of media, like your own website and social, and a lot of stuff on the web, those things can be done really quickly. Earned media, like awards and print media, run on a timetable that's not yours, and they can often work on a time scale of many months. So for those, we have to think long term and we have to think strategically. So how do we get from having a project to having it published? There are 5 major things that we need to be aware of, and we'll go through these step by step over the rest of this talk. First, you want to find your project stories, and at the same time, research why and where you might want to have them go. These are called media outlets. Places that publish them, of course, there are many, and we want to choose the one based on what our priorities are, what audiences we want to reach, and how that particular media outlet, or however many we want to get stuff out to, can go about reaching them. Once you know that, you need to plan when and how you are going to reach out to them. There is an order to this because every media outlet, awards, or other publication opportunity has its own timeline, and these can interrelate in good and surprising and sometimes frustrating ways. For instance, if you want to submit for and place in an awards program, then that's going to come with a bunch of potential publication opportunities. On the flip side, though, maybe you don't want to wait that long because, after all, the AFBC Awards happen every 2 years. The Canadian Interior's Best of Canada Awards happen every year. And in a situation like that, you might really want to be in a magazine where it's helpful to give the magazine an exclusive first scoop at publishing your project before you then subsequently enter it in award. And in that case, it might make sense to pitch that magazine first, see if they bite, and then if not, then you put your stuff in for awards. After that, it's down to the nuts and bolts of making sure that you have the media assets you need to get published. In most cases, that's going to come down to photos and other stuff that you probably already have. That's things like plans and drawings and renderings and project data and all of that other supporting information. Specifically, it is virtually impossible to get built things out into the media without having great photography. And whether you're planning an upcoming shoot or you already have something that you have already had photographed and are working with images that you have, there are a bunch of things that you need to be aware of to get the best results. Last but certainly not least, once you have that all in hand, you are ready to share that project. If it's going out on your own media, you can assemble that, have something written, or write it yourself and get it out there. For earned media that editors and whatnot are involved with, that's going to involve pitching. And that is when you reach out and raise the interest of an editor or writer at whatever media outlet you're reaching out to. Now, that's going to be largely relevant to things like magazine work, but it's a specialized enough process that the process of going through it can also be really useful to think of for your own work as well. So let's get started. Finding your project stories. Now, this is plural for a reason. We humans love stories, and so do your clients, and so do editors of publications. Most of your projects have a bunch of stories or angles that you might tell about it. Here's a few to get you started. Every publication is going to have a slightly different twist on this, and so you want to be ready for it and think of this so that you can reach out or if they ask. For instance, the interesting part of your project might be the client journey. How did the clients go about doing your particular project? How is the work that you did going to fulfill what they wanted, and how did they get that way? You can also look at how your project team actually delivered the project. And if you're using something like mass timber or prefab or that sort of stuff, you probably collaborated fairly closely with somebody else. And that collaboration can be really interesting because other people are going to want to do that as well. The same goes for projects where you did IPD or P3s or other things where the project management is a big part of how things happen. There's also issues of site and seasonality. Was your project done in a place that had particular environmental or logistical constraints? Could you, for instance, only build for 3 months out of the year because you were up north? And as a result, were there things that actually influenced that as a result? There's also a matter of what materials did you use? Are you using prefab? Are you using mass timber? Are you building underground? Are you, trying to do the first of a particular building type in a particular area? All of that sort of thing. There's also how your project gets used. And this is both now and in the future. Is your project intended to be flexed over time? Are there particular ideas that you want to allow your project to support either now or later? There's also constructability. Did you, for instance, have to use a particular team that, say, wasn't very experienced? Were there things that you did to make this more accurate or more friendly on site, or run faster, or all of that sort of stuff? There's also sustainability. Are you doing something like certified passive house? Are you addressing particular energy or climate concerns? All those sorts of things. Does your project interact with the history of the site, the place, or the building in some way? Those of you who are doing heritage work feel this a lot. Are you preparing for change to happen over time? Is the heritage that you're preparing for in front of you instead? That can be an interesting story as well. So as an example here, this is a project that we photographed a few years back. This is the Case and Clare hut, which is the first of several what are called the spearhead huts on the Spearhead Traverse up the pass behind Whistler. And it is hiking and skiing access only. This was a project that was volunteer built almost entirely over the course of several years. As you might imagine, when you have to hike or helicopter things in, there's huge accessibility challenges and constructability challenges here. The place also has to be durable and mostly self-sufficient because it has to be maintained and run by volunteers at best, or mostly on its own, out in literally the middle of nowhere. And it also has to be easy to support when it comes to water, heating, and waste, either handling things on site or making things straightforward to helicopter out, because that's the only effective way of servicing it year-round. It's also built to passive house standards, but due to a silly little rule, it can't actually be certified because it's not in a municipality. The project also has to work in all 4 seasons and integrate nicely within its overall landscape. And as a result, this project got a lot of consumer press because it's in an area where this can be a destination that a lot of folks up in Whistler want to go and visit or stay at. It also got a lot of attention in the architectural press because of all the challenges in actually building it and delivering it and how it has to be used, including an Architizer Award for us, which is pretty awesome. So that's a lot of different angles on one building. Now, if you look at any article in any architecture or design magazine that you might happen to have close at hand, you will notice that a lot of the articles sort of have a classic plot to them. Client has a problem, architect or designer went and solved it. Things happened along the way that you had to work with. You got results. Everybody learned things, and then stuff happened afterwards. And this is a good way of thinking about how the things that writers are going to ask you, likely as not, are going to sort of shape out. And this is where it's really useful to work with somebody who was not as close to the project as you are, because fresh eyes equals fresh ideas. A lot of the pitching and talking about your project happens when the project is done and you're sick of it. And as a result, that makes it really hard to remember all the good stuff and interesting stuff that might have happened along the way, which can be a good way of getting press. So keep notes along the way of things that are interesting that you might want to talk about later. Now, identifying and communicating stories isn't just good if you're thinking about being published in traditional media. They are a great way to organize your thoughts and talk about the project across media outlets. On this project, they basically had a 2 sentence or so summary that works great on their own website. Now, this is a little bit jargon heavy, but it actually fits in really well. And the idea of having a quick summary is something that you need to think about because that can be the heart of making a pitch. Now, sometimes the story you want to tell is actually firm-wide, and um, it is wider than a single project. For those of you who sort of fall into the emerging category or you're new, there are publication opportunities just for you. This is one that we photographed a while back for Canadian Architects annual 20 and change for emerging architects. And there's a bunch of awards and publications out there, and you should probably be aware of them. Now, different publications take different approaches. Think about it for a sec. Let's say you're doing a project that's technically interesting. Who do you want to reach with it and why? You probably want to reach your architectural colleagues, and then you also want to be reaching out to others who find that sort of work interesting. And you can do both, depending on what publication you are in. This is Nick Bray's house, The Passive Narrative. And this is an article that was in Monte Cristo magazine, which is a fine local, mostly sort of lifestyle-oriented magazine that often also covers local architecture. Here, we're looking at how the place fits into its surroundings and how it's a test case for solving a bunch of interesting housing problems. They're a consumer magazine, so they're looking for photos and text. But that's not the only angle we can take. SAB, which is trade-focused, because the house is certified passive house and it was built in a bog, there's a bunch of issues around sustainability, constructability, and all that. And in a trade magazine like this, we can look at them. If you're looking closely, you'll also notice that there is a before image in here. There's some project credits and performance data, and there's also some floor plans. And those are really common in trade media, and that's why you want to have those available. Now, this project also extensively uses prefab, and a few years after it was built, it ended up landing on the cover and with a great little feature in a book that was just on accessible prefabricated housing. And that's looking at one specific attribute, and that ended up in a book, which you can go buy. So one project, lots of opportunities over a very long period of time, ultimately. So now that we've looked at stories, let's look at what's out there for where your projects might end up. There are lots of places, and we call them media outlets, that serve the architectural and design world in various ways. As a result, we need to break them down into some useful groupings so that we have an idea of what we want to use and where they're based. The unfortunate thing is that as much as you might want to, you probably don't want to be chasing them all. So be strategic about this. The first way to look at things is how they get their content. There are generally three sort of flavors. There is paid content. And if you look at a magazine and see sponsored content up at the heading of something, that's content that somebody has paid to place in there. There are also publications that we refer to as pay to play. And these are ones where you can basically buy a feature along with some advertising. And these can be really good if you want to reach a particular market. Locally, there is a magazine called Build Magazine, which does exactly this. And they highlight projects and architects and suppliers and whatnot doing really good building work in a particular area. And that can be useful for clients who want to see who's doing what and how. It also looks really good. We're not affiliated with them, but there you go. Um, there's also directories, and these typically end up being sort of annotated lists of firms and all of that. Often associations publish them. Haven, the Home Builders Association, actually publishes one called Contact, which goes out along with Western Living in some areas, and that comes along with your membership. So technically, it's paid that way. There's also, of course, paid advertising and paid social media. The next category is earned media. And earned media has an editorial bent. And that means that somebody is going to be looking at and very carefully choosing the stories that go into them. These are things like magazines and books and awards and online publications. For earned media, you're not just submitting stuff in and then having it immediately appear. With earned media, somebody essentially vets and works through the content that is in there and writes and organizes it and curates it. And as a result, earned media has a higher profile because that gives you a certain amount of sort of validation that you've appeared someplace. And most of the magazines that we think of around the architectural world are essentially earned media. We also shouldn't forget media that you have control over as well. And these are things like your website, your proposals, case studies, learning units that you produce, just like this one, your own social media postings and whatnot. You can also self-publish your own books. And these typically take effort to do. You might already be doing a number of these. You're probably already doing your website. You're already taking an intentional look at how you do your proposals and your case studies because they're part of your marketing. For these, this stuff can move really quickly, but it is also very targeted as to who it gets out to. So if you're looking to broaden your audience, you want to be doing a combination, ideally, of all of these. And what that mix is depends on what you want to do. You can also break things apart by looking at who the audience is, who's intended to consume the media once it's out. Classically, this breaks down into two sorts of media in the architectural world. There is consumer media. Consumer media also tends to be called shelter media. You'll hear that. And these are magazines that are basically designed to be read and enjoyed by everybody. There's also trade media, and trade media usually has a controlled circulation. So not very many people outside of the architecture world and those who are really interested are reading, say, SAB or Canadian Architect or Award, but lots of us in the architectural community probably are. So if what you want to do is get a project out to your colleagues, trade magazines are fantastic ways to do this. These lines also get a little bit blurred because some magazines like Azure and Architectural Digest have both a consumer and a trade audience. After all, architecture and particularly interior design has a pretty wide amateur following. We can also look at where the audience is and where they publish. And this is a question of geography. Local consumer media usually wants local connections, whether your firm is located in that area or your project is. Sometimes a good local story might be local architect designed something cool in non-local place. Or maybe you're not from that area, but you're designing something interesting in that local area. Let's say that you are a Vancouver architect designing a structurally adventurous house in the Gulf Islands. you could go into a regional publication like Western Living, but you should also look at a magazine like, say, Spruce, which covers Victoria and the island, because a lot of folks on the island also have connections into the Gulf Islands. Now, national media also generally has a sense of being of national record, and that can be really important. Canadian Architect here in Canada, Architectural Record in the States tend to function this way for the trade. Now, a lot of international design magazines also have a fairly tight focus. Landscape Architecture magazine is international. There's also an international magazine called Dark that just focuses on lighting design. It's also worth looking at how and where a media outlet publishes. Almost every print magazine these days also has an online component. And sometimes that online component is just all the articles in the print version, but showing up later. But in an increasing number of cases, a magazine's print edition will differ a lot from their online edition. Now, there's a lot of good online-only outlets, things like Architizer, Arch Daily, DZine, Design Milk, etc. And while they might not have the cachet of having something in print, they move a lot faster and they take a lot more content, and they're also really widely read worldwide. So don't discount these, especially if you have a trade audience and what you want to do is be part of the conversation with your peers. Online is great for that because it's so much faster and it can also take so many more articles, so your chances are better. Now, a lot of traditional print publications also have an online component, and sometimes it's a lot different than what they publish in their print version. Architectural Digest is a great case of this because AD Print is pretty much interior design for and of the rich and famous. Their flagship online-only outlet, AD Pro, has much more of a trade and real estate audience, particularly amongst interior designers. So if you're doing, say, good residential work with an interior design component, unless you're designing for a celebrity client, being in the print version of Architectural Digest may well be out of your reach, but getting something into AD Pro is a definite possibility. And it's worth remembering that both of these options will let you put published in AD on your website. Nobody's going to ask whether you did it in print or online. Cool, hey? So at this point, we have an idea as to where and how we might find our project stories, some of the media outlets we might use to get those stories out and be part of the conversation. And now we get down to the nitty-gritty of planning how and where to get them out. And this largely comes down to scheduling, because every awards program and every publication that you don't control likely has a schedule of sorts, and you want to be aware of it. There is also an order to how and who you should get your project out to, and it's going to be a little bit different with each project depending on how it's finished, where you are in the award cycle, and all that. Things that go in print take a while to assemble, and they also take a while to print. This is why it's not uncommon to be shooting Christmas projects in July and August, because it can sometimes take that long to actually get stuff out. Now, with online publications, what gets published when is super flexible. With print publications and with awards entries, it is common to have fairly hard deadlines. And in print publications, it's common to build issues around particular themes. And for awards, the information about what categories there are, how to submit, and all that will be in a call for entries that they will usually send you outright. Go read them. In the print world, it's a little bit more difficult to find usually. In print, they have a thing called a media kit. And that is typically intended for advertisers, but it's useful for us as well. Media kits are usually found online, and media kits typically get published annually, and they tend to be published in the summer and fall. So if you go looking for media kits right now, you will probably, as I did, face a wall of broken links and failed downloads. Of the half a dozen or so that I tried to check for this presentation, exactly one of them worked. So I'll save you the effort and frustration and tell you to go mark this as something that you need to do in August or September when they refresh everything. Unless you, of course, really want to know one now, and then you probably get to reach out directly to the publication. Here's an example of what's in a media kit. This one's from Western Living. And there's information here about all of the media outlets that are sort of under Western Living's banner. So there's the print magazine, there's their website, there's newsletters that they send out, and they even have a special thing just for sponsored content and their social media. Here's what you really want to know: the editorial calendar. Most magazines put this out in advance because they want to get advertisers around certain topics. We can also use this when we go to pitch. And we see here that there are a couple of awards programs that they run in the March, April issues and the September, October issues that if you manage to get into one of these and place, that will get you in the magazine by default. There are also some other opportunities that we might want to pitch to be part of. If we had a really cool kitchen, we'd be looking at the kitchen and bathroom issue. They also give you the dates that they want people to get stuff in for and when those issues will be out to readers. Let's say we wanted to get something in the holiday issue. You want to take those hard close dates and subtract a month or so from them. Now, since Western Living publishes bi-monthly, if we have a project that fit the holiday issue, we would be wanting to pitch it essentially right now because that's right around the corner for the hard close of August. Now, there's always some exceptions to this. I once photographed a project in late August for a design client. She happened to be having a meeting with one of the writers for Western Living right after the shoot. They saw the photos, loved it, and that left us with about 3 days to finish and ship the images out to them so that it could make it into the December issue. We squeezed that thing in early October. That is the value of knowing people who know people. Now, if you are reaching out for earned media, it is tempting to think that you can just take your project, sit down and get yourself on the phone or blast out a bunch of emails to all your target publications at once using AI. Do not do this. This is bad. There are a couple of reasons why you do not want to spam editors. First off, they are getting absolutely deluged with AI slop that's not targeted to them and doesn't really fit their publications. Sending them AI slop as a spam is a sure way of making your pitch go right straight into the trash can. The second reason is that editors and writers are busy and they need projects to fill particular places in their publications. You'll be much more successful if you have something that is timely, relevant, and well prepared that you address directly to them and their needs that they can just pick up and run with. So you want to take the information from your media kits, from your awards call for entries and all that, and put a schedule together of when publication and awards opportunities might be so that you can work with them. When you're thinking about how and when to pitch, first off, you want to find the publications you most want to pitch to, and generally you want to pitch to them first. Then you want to figure out the order that you want, ideally, to pitch them in. Usually publications are pretty good at giving you a no or a maybe, and you can use this to your advantage. You also want to be making targeted pitches for them, ideally for particular sections, as I just said. Now, as a result of the deluge of junk AI pitches that people get, a lot of magazines are now being very explicit about how they want to be pitched. And they will tell you this. And this is great because if you can follow directions, that puts you above way lots of other people. You also want to have appropriate photography with options for them available. And once you have this, then you want to be planning out your timing and looking at options that pop up. So now that we have things scheduled, it's on to photos. Now, it's important to work closely with your photographer. And if you have an idea of what publications and awards opportunities you might be going out for, you want to share that with your photographer so that they can make sure that they cover all of their bases when they are on site photographing your building. Now, we actually have a whole other learning unit on working with architectural and interior photography that includes things like what photographers can do on site and in post, how to prepare, all of that sort of stuff. So if you want another one AIBC Core LU, you can go and sign up for this. And afterwards, I will put the link in the chat for that so that you can go do that if you are interested, and you can go do that on your own time anytime. Generally speaking, though, there are a number of things that you are going to want to make sure that you have in hand and that you let your photographer know that you need. Generally, It's worth noting that the photos that your publication wants might not actually be the same images and the same crops that you would use on your own. It's very common to have a few, usually 2 or 3 hero images that you share on the pitch, and then you want to make a larger selection of images available to the media outlet. And you can typically give them a link to this. Now, media outlets, particularly in print, will tend to crop and edit photos to fit a layout. And as a result, having a good mix of images available to them will make them really happy. Now, you'll notice something about these 3 hero images for the project. You've got one in the middle for sort of overall general context. You have one for a distinctive interior area that also shows a great use of wood. And then you have one that sums up some salient aspects of the entry sequence, which was an important part of this overall design. When you have a project photograph, you want to make sure that you have a mix of wide shots like this that show the overall context and landscape, if there is one. This one had a parking lot, which we sort of wanted to show less of. That happens too. You want some medium shots that show typically whole rooms in their entirety. And then you want to have some tighter details, particularly if you use materials in interesting ways. BC Wood, I think, has actually used this image in a number of their things as well. You also want to have a mix of vertical and horizontal images. Vertical images are great because they make for good cover images. And if you have some good vertical images with a bit of room on the top or bottom, that increases your chance of making the cover if you get in. You also want to have some good horizontal shots. And I mentioned that publications often crop images. And while photographers sometimes get their tail in a knot about this, if you're working with somebody who's fine with cropping, this gives you a lot more flexibility because you can take a wider image like this and crop in, for instance, square, which would go great on Instagram. You also want to make sure that your photographer covers important areas of your project, either from a visual sense or from a design sense or both. If it's an area where there might be enough material for an entire feature, make sure your photographer knows this. On this project, the central gathering area had some great design aspects, some really good lighting, and the whole character of it actually changed over the course of the day. So I went back here about every 3 or 4 hours and rephotographed parts of this just so that we had a sense of it. Now, fashions also change as to whether publications want daylight, twilight, or both. And if you've done work that depends on lighting, then twilight is going to be the time when things really pop. Now, another subject that's a matter largely of fashion, lights on versus lights off. For twilights, lights on all the time. For daylights, there's some variance. Years and years ago, Architectural Digest started effectively insisting that all interior images be shot lights off, and everybody kind of followed along with those. Years later, that's finally starting to break down, and people are being much more flexible about things, and we're getting more variance. This means that if you have particularly an interior project where the lighting is really important, then you should be highlighting that. In fact, in situations where the character of a place changes a lot based on how it's lit, it's part of the story to be able to photograph a space that has multiple uses in various ways that it might be configured and lit for those uses. Finally, sometimes you want to see people and sometimes you don't. And this can vary on a publication by publication basis. As a result, a lot of times in images where you could have people, I will typically do a people and non-people version just so that you have the option for doing both. So if you want a checklist, this is a good one to go through. You want a mix of things, you want different formats, you want all the areas of your project, and think about daylight versus twilight, lights on versus lights off, and people versus non-people. Finally, you want to make sure that your images are licensed for the publication. And this is a conversation that you want to have with your photographer because every photographer does this a little bit differently. Images are licensed to you usually as an architect, and the photographer will typically maintain the copyright to them. What rights get licensed to you and what rights gets licensed to the publication varies. And you want to be clear on this so that you have the right license for the right images for the publication that is requesting them. Now, in almost all cases, um, most publications can pay a certain amount for photographers for their image licenses. And that's a discussion that you want to be able to have with the publication and also with your photographer so that everybody gets the payment and the credit and the licenses that they need and nobody's rights and responsibilities get stomped on. So finally, at this point, we have an idea of how we might figure out our project stories, some of the media outlets, the schedule, the photos we need, and now we are down to actually making those pitches. And there are some best practices for making pitches. First off, you want to be pitching one publication at a time, usually. You also want to identify the right editor or the right project type that's a fit for your story. And this, in a print publication, is usually in the masthead, or if there's a particular area of a magazine that you want to go to, look at who the author is and then reach out to them. You also want to be focusing on a project or an aspect of your project that is a good fit for that. In a lot of cases, writers and publications really love having the first scoop on something. Being the first to publish a project is a good thing. And if you can offer that to them, then that can be a good way of getting your project actually in. In almost all cases, you will be using email or the online forms that a publication provides in order to get your stuff out there, unless you have either been explicitly directed to do otherwise, or you have a personal contact, at which point, do whatever you want. But generally speaking, this is a game of email and online submission. I'll say it again, don't spam. One of the cool things about the changes in the media world is that a lot of publications have guides out there for how they want to be pitched. And if you go and look up on their websites or you search for them, you can find them. If a publication has put something like this out for you, follow their directions and follow their guidelines. Do your homework here because this is going to make your life easier. It'll also help you help them, which of course helps them help you. The same thing also goes for awards call for entries. Now, I mentioned exclusives, and if you are offering somebody in the media an exclusive, there are a few little best practices that you want to make sure that you follow. First off, offer that exclusive for a limited time. You don't want to be basically left hanging. And if you've given them a time, and usually this is, a few weeks, a month or so, and they haven't responded for you, it is entirely okay to email them a follow-up and ask where they're at. You also want to make sure that you're not publishing photos on your own social media or online that you'll want to offer for publication in print. Teasers, behind the scenes, all of that sort of stuff is okay. Publications know that we all need to feed the social media beast. You also want to make sure that if you've offered an exclusive, that you tell your photographer and you tell your colleagues who worked on the project who might also be using those images to not publish them until you give the thumbs up. And that is something that you, at that point, become in control of. So honor the exclusive if you offer one, and be careful with it. It's a handshake agreement, and we all love making sure that handshake agreements are good. Another thing you can do, reach out to freelance writers who work for various publications that you want to be part of. They love this. And in Vancouver, we are lucky in this town to have at least 3 well-known and well-published freelance writers who do work for Canadian Architect, Wallpaper, and other media outlets who are usually really delighted to talk about projects. And if you reach out to them first, they can often be an excellent resource and give you a foot in the door. If you have direct contacts into publications, then you can also use those. And that can often get you faster and easier results than having to do cold emailing. So the pitch itself needs to be brief, concise, and specific. Again, editors are busy. Think 2 or 3 sentences and 2 or 3 fairly tight sentences. You want to avoid architecture speak, as tempting as it is. You also want to include 2 or 3 low-res photos. Those are the hero images that we talked about earlier. And you also want to have a link, ideally, to more information and more photos on your website so that they can get more information if it's interested, and also be easily contactable. Once an editor or writer turns out and expresses interest, those schedules can be really tight. And so being easily available to them will make their life a lot easier. So here we are. Now that you know what goes into this, you can think of this as a project plan for doing this. First off, you want to be finding your project's stories, researching how and when to share them, plan how and when to share them, create and assemble the assets you need, share or pitch them at the right place and the right time, and then finally, as an ongoing basis, evaluate the results and adjust as necessary. Things happen over the course of the project. Sometimes some good surprise opportunities come up. Sometimes we photographers get asked by editors, hey, do you have a project that would be perfect for X? And then we can reach out to you and go, hey, such and such a publication has reached out to us. Are you interested? Or sometimes a publication that you had your heart set on pitching gives you no. Then what? Find other publications, iterate, all of that sort of thing. Now, this can be a bit of a long process, but now you know how it all works, and you are ready to go forth and make your projects part of the wider conversation. Thank you very much. We will open it up for Q&A.
Thanks so much, Martin. Really appreciate this. I love the fact you've presented this in such a kind of systematic way. Um, Firstly, just before we go into questions and answers, just want to thank the guys in my office as well who've uh, organized this and hosted this event. And again, just a reminder about the AIBC CBD form if you want to get those points. This is the only way you're going to receive them. So please go ahead and fill out that form. Got a few questions here, but please, if you have questions, do not be afraid to ask them. Please enter them in the Q&A box. I realize this is a new platform that we're working on here today, but there's a Q&A tab down the bottom, lightly down the bottom of your screen there. So please feel free to ask any questions. Um, I've got a first question here about the licenses, and you spoke a little about that, Martin. But I know it works differently for different photographers, but do publications, do they expect you to have already paid for that license that they require? How does that work? And would that potentially apply to all publications from there on, or is it individual?
The short answer is it depends. It is things will move faster if you already have those licenses available to you. But we've also seen that a publication can sometimes want images that a photographer has made available, but you didn't actually license. And in that situation, they'll probably want you to license them. There are publications out there, particularly in the US, where they're much more aware of these things and tend to have higher budgets, where they will pay editorial licenses directly to the photographer. And as a result, these vary from publication to publication. And that's why you need to be ideally incorporating your photographer as part of your team for getting these for getting photos out and making sure that everything works out the way that you want it to be.
Fantastic, thank you. I guess I mean my offer, we've never paid for media before. Is there any risks associated with that? Is it looked down on? Is there a concern that if you pay for that, maybe it's not taken as seriously, or you're not taken as seriously?
Um, it depends on what you're doing. If what you want is to say, essentially published in such and such a magazine on your website, very few, if any, folks outside of maybe other media folks will look at that. Um, if you have information that you want to get out, particularly that is more oriented to a particular product or construction method or that sort of stuff, that is very common to do as sponsored content. So if you look, for instance, in Architectural Record, they have a learning unit section which is entirely sponsored content. If what you want to do is say that you have been published editorially in a particular place and you want that particular cachet, then the only way to do that is to actually get editorial coverage. So again, it depends on what you're trying to do as to whether that actually matters.
Yeah, I guess that kind of leans into the, what you were saying about the, I guess, inclusivity of publications wanting to be the first to present something. You don't want to kind of ruin that opportunity by paying for it to go into something else. Uh, With that in mind, you mentioned, you're not publishing photos or completed photos, maybe just some, yeah, some little sort of intro photos, but nothing, not the major photos on your social media. Would that apply to waiting, and not publishing on your website as well until you get the opportunity to give an exclusive?
Yeah, if you're wanting to give somebody an exclusive, then that exclusivity also applies to your websites. If you're not giving an exclusive, then that's fine. Basically, put it up there. That's part of the reason why, if you look at a lot of architects' websites, you won't see absolutely current projects up there. You'll see projects that get typically delayed by about a year, and that's because there is a pipeline for possibly exclusive media coverage that they are wanting to take advantage of before they put it out. That does not apply to things that don't have wide distribution. So, for instance, if you are wanting to put something into a proposal or an RFP response, or something where your publication or the people who aren't going or the people who are going to read it are never going to see it, that's fine. So the rule of thumb is that if you are wanting to put if you are wanting to put photos someplace, could that publication in a Google search or by looking around find those images? If the answer is yes, don't do it. If the answer is no, you're probably all right. That means that usually, if you're wanting to schedule things out, you want to be looking for your exclusive earned media first. And then if you can't get to there, then talk about doing paid media if it makes sense. And then after that, go into self-publish options.
Sure, sure. And just, I mean, this is also going to vary very massively between different publications, but like, are they quite responsive? Do you get an answer back straight away, or can it take months? What we're talking about?
You're usually talking weeks.
Okay.
Sometimes you get an answer within days if somebody is really on the stick. But writers and editors are busy and they get a lot of pitches. So if you don't get something back, then that's why you want to be reaching out after a few weeks. If you've offered an exclusive and you want to check in, like, are you just basically hanging on this because you haven't gotten around to seeing it? Or are you actually giving me a no here? Or are you giving me a yes?
Fantastic. I kind of ask a question here that relates to that. So, what's the best channel of communication to reach out to these publications? Like, could we lean on the photographer or the writer, or or just go? Is it okay just to communicate direct?
You can do any or all. Generally, whoever has the best or closest contacts is usually the best person to go in for things. And that can depend. If you've got contacts at a media outlet that you either know or has reached out to you, feel free to use them. If you are talking with your photographer and you ask them, hey, what do you know who might be interested in this? We usually have ideas and contacts and whatnot, often in some fairly niche places. For instance, if you're doing work in mid-century modern, there's a magazine out there called Atomic Ranch, which I have some fairly close contacts in, and I would be wanting to reach out simply because they're going to be uh, paying closer attention to that because we have that pre-existing connection.
Sure, makes sense. Oriana asks, in your opinion, what are the best architectural pictures or videos for social media, Instagram, LinkedIn? Is there any, would you lean, or your choice of, I guess she's asking, would you lean your choice of your photos in a particular direction?
I'm not sure that I understand the question.
I guess
Oriana,
she's
can you
asking.
clarify that, please?
We'll wait and see if she responds back. But I guess she's asking, is there a particular type of shot, sort of an angle on a type of shot that those sort of social media accounts would be looking for?
Yeah, so usually that depends on the account. And usually the way to find that out is to look at the account, see what they like, and then see how you might be able to fit in with that. And usually, if you do that, then you'll see that there are sort of particular conventions that they follow. They might like particular sorts of projects. They might like projects in a particular area. They might like projects with a particular overall design intent. And that also applies to magazines. So, look at recent issues, look at things that have come out, look at social media feeds, look at what gets out on their websites, and think about that as part of the homework that you're doing.
Brilliant, thank you. I mean, on the couple of projects we've had do well on in the media, we found that it very much snowballs. You get published somewhere, or it gets in a newspaper article or whatever else, and then you get other people contacting you. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit. Yeah, how you can encourage that.
Yeah, so if you have an interesting project and interesting stories that can apply to a variety of media outlets, that's great. And it's often the case that you'll end up with something that is local that will then get subsequently picked up in another national or other venue, or it can work vice versa. And in situations like that, that can be a good way to go if you are not on a particular timeline. Because Nick, as you know, that can take a fair while to actually get going. But when it does, that can save you a lot of work because then people are reaching out to you as opposed to you reaching out to other people. And you want people to be reaching out to you.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we're getting close to the hour here. I just want to say thank you again, Martin, for this presentation. Is it okay if people reach out? There you go, just on time. People can reach out to you there on your email address. Um, yeah, as I said, last chance here to fill in your AIBC for your CPD points. The form is in the Q&A box there, and hopefully we can see you soon at the next seminar. Thank you very
Yes,
much for your
absolutely.
time.
You're welcome. And if you want to go and take a look at our other learning unit on architectural and interior photos for awards and media under the link for AIBC LU, I've got a link in there as well. Or at
Fantastic.
least I
And
think I do.
well, if not, we'll send up a follow-up email anyway, and in that email there'll be a link to the video of this seminar as well. So if you want to have a look at these slides again, you can watch the video on our YouTube channel. But brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for attending, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Take care.